panelists, who I will introduce as we go through the session. The session today has two parts. It has a keynote speech, and we have then a series of panel members, and it will conclude with a Q&A session where also the online community is very much invited to post questions. So please, we count on your active participation. What would we like to achieve with this session? The session should highlight the role of the mountains in combating and recovering from the climate change impacts and also from the COVID crisis. So that's the two purpose. And it will give examples by the different speakers and recommendations on how we can even step up on giving more attention and more opportunities to the mountain regions. Let me start the session also with some introductory words on behalf of the Moutain Partnership. As we all know, mountain ecosystems are highly vulnerable to the increasing adverse impacts of climate change. The retreat and thinning of mountain glaciers around the world is affecting the water cycles, and its increasing effects on environment, livelihoods of highlands and lowlands of the mountain regions. Climate change also contributes to the frequency and magnitude of extreme weather events and natural hazards. So unseasonal rainfalls can lead to flooding, destroy crops. Too little rain can also mean crop failure and the death of livestock, and have a far-reaching effect on the economy and obviously on people's livelihoods. Not alone, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually accelerated the vulnerability of mountain regions. And many communities have severely been suffering and been affected by that. So the vulnerability has increased, and that was already present not only by climate change but also by other crises. And I'd like to highlight two regions here. And we actually have the opportunity to hear from the distinguished panelists from the specific region. In the Hindu Kush region, in the Himalayas, there's this vast storehouse of water in frozen form, hosting the world's greatest concentration of ice outside the polar region. It's actually also called the third pole, which provides the water that 1.3 billion people depend on for survival. So that is really huge. And along with the annual monsoon, it has a severe impact of climate change. In Latin America, to name another region, climate change in the mountain regions is leading to an out-migration of inhabitants to unsustainable land use practices, such as encroaching of paramos, resulting in desertification and loss of biodiversity severely. Our speakers from that region will further illustrate consequences for humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know we're running out of time, and this voice has been really carried forward by governments, by civil society, by private sector stakeholders at this COP26. It was heard loud and clear, but words are not enough. It needs to actually transform into action and finance. And also finance has been a really important matter, in particular adaptation finance at this COP. So, without further ado, I'd also like to quickly point to the role of the Mountain Partnership, which is a very important alliance by the United Nations. It's a voluntary alliance dedicated to mountains and mountain people, whose secretariat is hosted by FAO within the Forestry Division. And it has over 430 members, including government, civil society, intergovernmental organizations, and they're all working together for a common goal, meaning protecting mountains and building the resilience for the mountain communities. So with this short introduction, let us go further and actually hear the voices of the panelists. So I'm very excited to invite the first and our keynote speaker for the session, Mr. Pem Narayan Kandal. He's the Secretary of the Ministry of Forestry and Environment from the government of Nepal, who will deliver some opening words on the importance of climate change, mountain, and humanity. The floor is over to you. Please, Pem.
Thank you very much. My topic of discussion is about climate change, mountain, and the future of humanity. So this is very important topics, and I'll discuss something on these topics, and then we'll be interactive later. So as we know that mountain and Himalaya comprises about 27% of the Earth's land surface. Hindu Kush Himalaya is the largest mass of mountain and Himalaya. It is also home to 15% of the global population. Therefore, very big population is dependent on mountain and Himalayas. It also hosts about the half of the world biodiversity hotspot. It means mountain and Himalayas are very diverse, very important to conserve biodiversity because of altitudinal variation, and also the region, because microclimate is there, the biodiversity in the mountain is very, very high. It is also important to note that the mountain and Himalaya are the most beautiful landscape, attract nearly 25% of the global tourism. Therefore, there is scope to increase the tourism in the region. Furthermore, the Himalayas are the water tower of the world. A river basin with headwaters in mountain provide fresh water to more than half of the world's population. So it provides the water for the downstream people. So this is very important watershed. Features are many with, there are a number of features of the mountain in ecosystem and environment with ethnicity, very high ethnicity is there, civilization, endemism, and cultural diversity. So there is very big cultural diversity in the mountain. So therefore, mountain provides number of goods and services to the planet. So it does not provide the goods and services for the people living around, but it also provides the goods and services for the world, for the planet. Therefore, mountain ecosystem is hub and called as a pulse of the living planet. So this is the pulse of the living planet. So that is my first conclusion. And so what is the implication of climate change and mountain? That is another important topics we have to discuss. Many studies reveal that mountain and Himalayas regions are more warming than the global average temperature rise. So there are many reasons because of their altitude, slope, and orientation to the sun. Mountain ecosystems are vulnerable, easily disrupted by variation in climate. So mountain regions are more warmer than the global average. So that is the conclusion by many study and report. So as a result, mountain glaciers are melting, biodiversity is declining, and peoples are facing even greater hardship in mountain as a result of global warming and climate change. People of the mountain, they are realizing more hardship for their livelihood and for their life. Climate-induced disasters have become the phenomenon that includes flood, landslide, glacier melting, snow melting, and other. Therefore, climate-induced disaster is big challenge of the mountain and Himalaya region. I'm representing from Nepal, very vulnerable country, the fourth most vulnerable country of the world in terms of climate change, in terms of climate-induced disaster. So I'm representing from that country, and we can realize that how hardship is there due to climate change. So it is also important to cite that average 650 people killed per year due to the landslide, flood, wildfire, and other climate-induced disaster since last 10 years. The trend is increasing, even more accelerating. Economic and non-economic loss are huge. So there is big loss, economic and non-economic losses are there. So recently, last October, second week of last October, because of the extreme weather, intense rainfall, about 200 people killed due to landslide and flood. So this is the situation of mountain and vulnerable country like Nepal. Thus, mountain landscape and people are most vulnerable and impacted due to the climate change. So this is another inference that I would like to highlight, that mountain ecosystem and landscape and also people are most vulnerable due to the climate change, due to the global warming. So this voice should be listened. This is very important. Mountain people are not the reason of the climate change. Mountain people, they are not, emitting the carbon. They are not emitting the greenhouse gases. Therefore, they are not the reason of the climate change. They are living in and with the nature. They are living with the nature. Very nature-based livelihood is there. So they are not the emitter. But the question I would like to raise here is why mountain issue has not been rightly included in the agenda of climate change and the process of negotiation. We are trying to include this issue in the process of negotiation, but not that much listening. I would like to disseminate to you, listener, that. This is the question that I would like to raise, and we have to raise the voice as well. So, mountain, we are talking about the future of the humanity, mountain life depends upon the nature. So they are living with the nature. Nature-based solution is important for the mountain people. Climate change put the enormous stress on high mountain life. So it posed the stress, it pushed that the people are on stress. Loss of biodiversity and reduced availability of clean drinking water. This is a big problem in the mountain region of Nepal. So water scarcity, water deficit, and loss of biodiversity, because people are living in the nature. If we lost the biodiversity, then that is very difficult to the people to sustain their livelihood. Loss of rise to wildlife and human pathogens, leading to increase the probabilities of zoonosis and pandemism. COVID-19 has further increased the vulnerability of mountain people. So there is a big relation between climate change and pandemism. That is matter of further study, whether this COVID-19 has come because of the climate change or not. That is the matter of the further study. But the pandemism is increasing because of the increasing in global warming. So that is the case even in the mountain. Thus, the climate change and COVID pandemism have become the fragile source of humanity in the mountain. So this is another conclusion. The climate change and COVID pandemism has very big implication in the mountain context. In this context, how to deal mountain and climate change? So this is the question that we have to answer. The context is there. The mountain is very vulnerable to the climate change. Then the questions comes how we can deal with the mountain and the climate change. People like us who works in the policy level, global communities who are looking after the climate change mitigation and adaptation, how to deal the mountain. So that is very much important to be answered. So my recommendation would be recognize the climate vulnerability in the mountain. So this is the issue that we have to realize. This is the most important, that mountains are very vulnerable and vulnerable to climate change. Therefore, let us recognize mountain as a vulnerable landscape. So this is important to understand at national, regional, and even global scale. High priority to the mountain agenda in all climate-related negotiations. Let us give the priority, high priority to this agenda. And loss and damage, because of the fragility, climate-induced disaster, that is big, huge disaster there. So we have to understand the loss and damage, or stand-alone agenda for negotiation. We have to put the money for climate change adaptation and loss and damage as well. So that is also agenda that we are putting forward in this negotiation. Support the framework for additional financing for it. I mean, it is important to note that because the issue is there. Climate-induced disaster is important, or more vulnerable country. So additional funds should be allocated for climate change adaptation and loss and damage as well. Increase investment in water, forestry, clean energy, green technology, and nature-based solution. That is the only way to think on mountain ecosystem, mountain ecology. So we have to put our investment on water conservation, land conservation, clean energy, and green technology, and nature-based solution. So those could be the good strategy to deal the mountain ecosystem. And another important agenda, mobilize and strengthen the social capital. People are, there with their local knowledge, traditional knowledge, so they are very knowledgeable people. Let us use their capacity as a capital to sustain mountain ecosystem. Utilize strong social capital for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So we have to utilize the capacity, knowledge, and experience of local people who are living around the mountain. And also another important matter, collaboration and networking. So I already mentioned that mountain people are very knowledgeable, and we have to collaborate with other stakeholders, other players, so that we can do more work on mountain. So nature-based solution is only the sustainable solution to deal with the climate change in the mountain. Nature-based infrastructure and institutions are important, and climate resilient livelihood. So we have to improve the livelihood because relatively mountain people are poor. It is important to note that. So they are poor because of many reasons: inaccessibility, fragility. There are a number of reasons that they are behind. So land and water conservation is the key, because land and water are the fundamental natural resources of the earth, of the planet, of the mountain region. Therefore, their conservation and management is very important to secure the food security and to sustain the livelihood in the mountain. Eventually, mountain is the most magnificent landscape and productive ecosystem of the planet. Let us realize that mountains are very productive and very beautiful landscape. We have to realize this of the planet. So, but fragility and sensitivity to climate change due to geographical setting and socioeconomic context, because land is fragile due to geophysical setting and socioeconomic context, as I already mentioned that. So issue-related mountain must be realized and look as the opportunity. Let us see the mountain as an opportunity to mitigate and adapt climate change to ensure future humanity in the region. So I think that is the only way of thinking in this context. Thank you for listening. Maybe we will discuss about the matter later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pam. I really liked your opening speech because it shows so much commitment to the mountain community, and you started your keynote speech by emphasizing the beauty of the landscapes and the importance to recognize that the people living in mountain regions are often poor and are the ones suffering the most and are the most vulnerable. So I think this is a really, really important voice, and it's really great you bring that into the COP26 process, because it is about understanding the particularity of mountain systems and the need for adaptation and for focused action. And as you said in your recommendations, it's a call for looking at the socioeconomic dimensions of nature asset building, not only, but also you call for collaboration and putting like hands and heads together to make this action happen. So thanks so much for this very caring opening remarks. I'm really impressed. So with that, we'd like to hear from a second voice, and I have on my left side here the distinguished panelist, Lalami Wagel. I hope I pronounced the name rightly. He's the program coordinator of the Clean Energy Nepal organization. And as I understand, you will present on some of the examples on approaches that have been successful and maybe have the potential for its scaling up in Nepal. The floor is yours, please.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. It's me, Lalmani from Clean Energy Nepal. We are working with climate change and environmental issues for more than 2 decades, and now we are working with the farmers to make them resilient to deal the impact of the climate change. So we are working in the farmers from the mountain. So I initially want to focus on the why mountain and what is in fact mountain means to the lives that daily face the mountain and its issues in their daily lives. So while we are listening and talking about the mountain, so in many places and for many people, it's only the majestic high mountains with white beautiful snow. But while we are talking about the life in the mountain, there is another part of the story. So mountain with life have some distinguished feature. So mountain have its fragility, mountain have its inaccessibility, it has very diverse situation which has very diverse nature within a very small region that demand the very specialized skill and knowledge to deal with this diversity, with fragile and inaccessible nature of the mountain. So it has already it has already tough nature in mountain, and now we have the additional issue and additional problem in the name of climate change, which further push the mountain people to the additional challenges. So we have now the sixth assessment report, report of the first working group that clearly mentioned that with high confidence the temperature is rising in the mountain, and the ice balance and the melting rate of the ice in the mountain area, especially in Himalaya, is rising. So it also emphasized with high confidence that the changes, especially in the temperature rise and the ice melting rate, it will pose the challenges to the water supply, electricity production, ecosystem integrity, agriculture and forestry production, as well as disaster preparedness in the region and the ecosystem integrity. So we are in the COP and we are talking about the more clean energy and renewable energies, but in mountain, we are talking about the huge potential of the mountain countries regarding the hydropower and hydroelectricity, but again, it is challenging that potential also. So it has just reducing the chances to shift towards the hydroelectricity, which is considered as a clean energy for the mountain country. Besides that, mountain, especially as I'm from Nepal, we have some another local issues in middles of the Himalaya. So in recent years, we are experiencing the rapid dry up of the spring source. It is a water source in the middles, so it is the lifeline for the middles people. So in last 20 years, Nepal experiencing more than 20 to 25% of its stream has already dried in that region. So this kind of situations already compelled many people and community to migrate from their own land. So it already creating the huge impact in the mountain community. Besides that, in Himalayan region, we are facing and witnessing the very rare and in some extent it's a new climate related events. Recently in October, we have huge rainfall and followed by the floods in Nepal, which was not expected in October generally. That cost hundreds of lives and huge loss of the properties. Similarly, in recent years, in high mountain region, there is some places, Manang and Mustang, it is the rain-shy area. So it is also considered as the arid zone of the Nepal, which experienced the massive rainfall and the flood that damages numbers of properties on their way. So this is the rare incidents we are experiencing at this moment. And another case is we had in last year. So Nepal experienced one of the longest drought, and followed by the drought, we had thousands of cases of the wildfire, forest fire, which has a huge impact beyond the forest ecosystem. So this kind of problem we are already facing because of these changes in the mountain. So with this, as mountain already have some specific feature that create the life in the mountain very tough, and in addition to that, we have climate change impact. In this situation and in these conditions also, there are some peoples who are facing the challenges of the mountain to survive, and to just ensure their better livelihood. So farmers, especially smallholder farmers, are the best case in the mountain, which have very specified knowledge and specified skills to deal with those specificity of the mountain to sustain their livelihood through the farming. But the changes we have experiencing due to the climate change put them in huge risk. It doesn't mean the impact of climate change or the changes in the mountain only affect the people who are who are in mountain, but I didn't mean that, but it has also the impact in global range also. The ice melting in the Mount Everest region can also have impact on the Argentine coast, and the changes in the Peru's mountain can increase the risk of the Maldives. So this is the interconnected and the very huge impact if we cannot control the changes in the mountain. So we cannot consider the mountain agenda as isolated as an issues and only the agenda and issues of the mountain countries. It has global impact, and we have to deal, as Dr. Cordell said, it has to be considered in the UNFCCC negotiation process. It has to be highlighted in the text as well. So there are a number of frustrating cases and stories that arise from the changes in the mountain environment, but we have, again, there is some hopes. We have also some kind of better practices and to deal with these changes and the challenges. So I would like to conclude my point with some positive hopes. So we have one short video which show how the smallholders community, which have very limited land resources, and in addition to that, there are some landless community also who are working in the agriculture system, deal with these changes to sustain their livelihood and to ensure the productivity of their agriculture. So I would like to share the video. So let's see the video which show some adaptation practices in Nepal.
जुठेरो खाल्डो भयो हैन अब सिमेन्टीको पोखरी भयो अहिले चाहिँ हामी त्यहीबाट चाहिँ सिँचाइहरू गर्छौँ बेमौसमी सब्जीहरू चाहिँ निकाल्न सकिन्छ नि त टनेल भएपछि पानीहरूबाट चाहिँ बचाउन सकिन्छ नि
त्यति बेलाको अवस्था चाहिँ एकदमै नाजुक है दुःखदायी थियो यस्तो हाम्रो पहाडको ठाउँमा अब 350 मिटर तलको पानी चाहिँ तानेर हामीलाई अब धेरै सेवा सुविधा चाहिँ दिनुभएको छ
विषादीले हामीलाई सुरक्षा भनौँ न हामीलाई हानि पुर्याउँछ बरु त्यो भन्दाखेरि गाई भैँसीको पेसाब पनि हामीले छर्किन सक्यो भने केही न केही राम्रो हुन्छ भनेर हामी त्यही पेसाबहरू नै छर्किने गर्दैछ सर अहिले
वनमा गएर दाउरा भारी बोकेर ल्याउँथ्यो अहिले त्यति साह्रै पर्दैन सर गोबर ग्यासबाट मल निकालेर लाँदाखेरि बारी पनि मलिलो हुने अनि मकै तरकारीहरू नि सब कुरो राम्रै भइरहेको छ
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lalami, and also thank you for sharing this very emotionally touching video. I think what you bring into the discussion is really important, is to really imagine what life is in the mountain region and to show how you described how people are actually living on the edge. I mean, it has been already a difficult livelihood. And with climate change, there's such a huge burden, additional burden, which calls for really important action and attention. No? And I guess that's what I hear clearly from Pam and you also, Lalami. And what you also both message is that the temperature actually has increased already, and climate change is not a matter of a future, which a lot of people always think, well, this is happening like in the future, like in 5 to 10 years. It is actually a day-to-day matter and concern for many. So I really, really appreciate that. You also bring in the dimension not only of the drought and the floods, but you actually mentioned the wildfire, which is an additional kind of dimension which is often undervalued because it is destructive. It just takes people's livelihood away in a second of life. And how do you recover from that? So thanks so much. I'm sure we have more time, hopefully, in the Q&A to look at some other points you mentioned. In the meantime, I also want to go back and thanks to the attention to our online community listening to our interesting session today. And I'm really pleased to bring in our next speaker and change the focus of the region to Latin America. And I'd like to warmly invite Luigi Schettini to be the next panelist. He is representing the Asociación Oikos from Peru. And your title is, you're a technical officer working from there. And we like to hear from you in particular on what is the impact on our second topic, which is the COVID-19 impact in the Andean region, and what's the impact of the people's livelihood. Over to you, Luigi.
Okay, good afternoon. You can see the
We hear you perfectly, and we also see your presentation. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, Mrs. Julia Wolf, colleagues, participants of the event, and public connected to the transmission. We started the presentation titled Impact of COVID-19 in the Andean Livelihoods. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Background, Peru is a country of tropical mountains. The mountain population is mainly represented by native communities and by small producers who practice family farming. They are the guardians of the great biodiversity of the Andes. They handle ancestral knowledges, valuable for the management of water, soils, and biodiversity. Mostly, these settlers are located at altitude between 2,500 meters and 4,500 meters above sea level, and are the most vulnerable population in the country. Next slide, please. Problems of the high Andean population before the pandemic. They are years of a great cultural wealth. However, they live in a situation of exclusion and poverty. The chronic malnutrition rate is 32%, and the incidence of poverty is 46%. The places where they live do not have basic services such as drinking water, drain service, electricity, good quality education, health services, land access roads, telephone connection, or internet. Not even think about heating. All this translates into low economic incomes, low educational levels, chronic child malnutrition, technological backwardness at all levels, high migratory rates from the field to the city, especially of the young population. Climate change has led to less rainfall and longer periods of drought that contribute to the melting of glaciers and threaten the livelihoods of around 4 million people. Impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the high Andean population's livelihood. The potential economic and social impact of COVID-19 is still uncertain. The pandemic affected in a more critical way people who were already in a situation of vulnerability before, as is the case of indigenous and rural populations, inhabitants of the mountains. The crisis caused by COVID-19 significantly affected small producers who were unable to sell their products. Due to the quarantine, transportation was restricted, local fares were limited, and there was no access to markets. Next slide, please. Okay, adaptation of the high Andean population to the COVID-19 pandemic. The sociocultural heritage of the rural communities has been the sustenance to resist various crises and has helped to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. The communities may maintain many traditional practices, such as chalacuy, it means exchange, haini, it means mutual help, and reciprocity, give and receive. In the communities, exchange is practiced between families and between communities. Llamas or llamas caravans are an ancient Andean practice. They are used to exchange products with other communities. In this tradition, the men and women of the field go on long walks between communities in the same region or neighboring regions to market their products, using llamas or llamas to transport the product on their backs. Impact of the pandemic on the alpaca fever production chain. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a sudden market shutdown. The breeding of South American camelids constitutes one of the most important productive and economic activities in the high Andean zone. On it depends between 70 to 80% of the annual family income. It should be considered that the countries that represent 95% of the Peruvian alpaca fever market, in this case China and Europe, closed their borders, and especially the market. Small producers have been affected first by the fall in the price of fever, and then by the total closure of the market. Okay, continue with this item. In Peru, there are approximately 80,000 small alpaca producers with herds between 80 to 120 alpacas, and that on average generate income of $1,000 per year. The impact of the pandemic on these producers is estimated to be very strong, especially for those who are properly organized. With all the problems generated by global warming, carrying out a responsible production which takes care of the environment and cares about the welfare of the animals is the only alternative. Next slide, please. To finish the presentation, we present some proposed solutions. The Peruvian state must pay part of the foreign exchange and taxes that are generated in this production chain in the same sector, in social infrastructure, in connectivity, in productive infrastructure, in research, etc. Also, strengthening of small producers by promoting associativity, technological innovation, and access to financing. In addition, the breeding of South American camelids must be adapted to the new market demands and achieve a responsible and certified production. Next slide, please. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Luigi. You really had an excellent presentation and emphasizing what is actually the situation of this 80,000 herd holders and the socioeconomic impact. In fact, that's something I hear from Pam, from Lamani, and yourself, is that it's really important to voice what is the impact of climate change in the socioeconomic terms. I think for me, having followed a lot of the COPs, it's actually the first COP where the inclusiveness is really so strong, and it's being more and more heard by governments, but it is a continued message that needs to be carried forward, and you all three are doing such a great job in talking about the who is impacted and what it actually means to people's livelihood, and in the particular region of the mountain. So thanks so much for giving really concrete details and very clear recommendations, because what needs to happen at COP as well, apart from the negotiations, is the exchange and providing a dialogue forum, which we try to do, for example, through this event, between the decision makers and the policy makers, and telling them what is the impact, what is their power of decision making, so the impact that the most vulnerable will suffer less in the near future, let's put it this way. Now, I'd like to hand over the voice to our last speaker, who is also a virtual participant, and I'd like to invite Luis Daniel Lambi. He's from the Consortium of Sustainable Development of the Andean Ecorregión, CONDESAN, and I'm really curious to hear about the best practice you'd like to share with this community here online. Thank you. Over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Excellent, we hear you very well.
Good, I sent the presentation. I'm not sure if it can be shared. If not, I can just talk through it.
Unfortunately, we don't have it available, just talk.
Okay, yeah, well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here with this distinguished panel. And I just wanted to share with you some reflections about knowledge management for climate change adaptation in the tropical Andes. Climate change is having a huge impact already in the region. The combination of equatorial latitude and high elevation is generating very fast warming rates of up to 0.4 degrees centigrade per decade in high areas. Very heterogeneous changes in precipitation, which generate also a very high uncertainty in terms of sustainable water management. And this combines with very diverse also strategies of land use, and land use impact across the region. In general, a higher proportion of land is transformed in the northern Andes than in the central Andes, also there is a gradient of transformation from the highlands to the lowlands. And the combination of climate change and land use change then is generating very important challenges. Then in terms of glacier change, this is one of the regions that is being more affected. In fact, the mean annual balance of the glaciers of loss of glaciers is higher in the tropical Andes in terms of the rate of loss than the global average. That means that depending on the region, we have lost from 20% to 100% of the glaciers. In fact, in the case of Venezuela, it's very interesting because this will be very, very soon the first post-glacial nation in the Andes. So this is already making us face a future with no glaciers. And Venezuela will be the first in the next probably 5 years, only one remaining glacier that is about to disappear. This has very important consequences for ecosystem services and landscapes. So you have, for example, the famous peak water curve, in which as glaciers recede, then you have initially an increase in water, but then a decrease in stream flow. But the less appreciated consequence of this is the changes in vegetation dynamics, in wetland degradation, and the impact that then this has on rural production systems like landscapes and livelihoods. So from CONDESAN, what we're trying to do is to use an adaptation to climate change approach that has to be inextricably linked to sustainable land management in terms of knowledge generation, conservation, restoration, and sustainable production, and strengthening governance with the participation of government, civil society, and the market. So this also poses very important challenges in terms of knowledge management and knowledge governance. For example, the interaction between governments and civil society in terms of provision of official statistics, transparency, co-production of knowledge between governments and scientists, and co-production and knowledge dialogue between civil society and scientists. So the last part, I just want to talk to you about some examples of what we're doing in the Adaptations at Altitude program at CONDESAN. The idea of this program is to tackle 4 issues. One is knowledge synthesis for climate change adaptation. The second is strengthening participatory monitoring. The third is consolidation of Andean decision platforms like the Andean Mountain Initiative, which is a platform that joins the 7 Andean countries. And then the fourth is knowledge exchange and capacity building. In terms of our knowledge management approach, we started with a knowledge gaps analysis, and based on this analysis, we have been generating synthesis of knowledge, for example, on climate change policies in the Andes, and how this links with multi-scale formulation of policies from local communities up to the national and the regional level. We have also been working on building a platform of environmental and social indicators for the Andes. A lot of the information is heterogeneously dispersed between different sources. So what we're trying to do is to generate one single platform in which you can find information on climate change, land use and conservation, biodiversity and ecosystem services, and demography and socioeconomic conditions. And then I wanted to briefly mention the effort we are doing with the project in generating an adaptation and altitude solutions portal in collaboration with the We Adapt platform. We have already more than 40 solutions so far from the Andes, the Caucasus, the Himalayas, and East Africa on the platform. And in the case of the Andes, we already have available a solution on ecosystem-based adaptation in rural production systems, both from the central and the northern Andes, solutions on integrated water management, sustainable agriculture and irrigation, ecosystem restoration, hydropower, and solutions also on multi-scale governance strategies and how to generate knowledge co-production from local communities up to the national and international level. So this is just an invitation to share solutions from mountains in the portal and to continue working on documenting, systematizing, and sharing and generating dialogue on climate change adaptation in the region. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luis. And you bring in a very important dimension into discussion, which is how is knowledge generated, documented, kept, shared, and also used and informed decision-making. So thanks so much for making this point. It is very important. You also refer to the what we heard also from Lamani before on the energy. I didn't pick up this point before, but since you mentioned it again, energy is a very important issue. Sustainable energy, access to sustainable energy to sustain livelihoods, businesses, and build resilience is a key topic in mountain regions. So now, this is the 4 voices we wanted to reflect in the session. And now I'd like to invite all of the 4 speakers to conclude the sessions together with me. And I'd like to do that the following way. So Pam, Lalmani, Luigi, and Luis. No? The question I'd like to ask you, and it's also taking us back to where we are today, is the COP26 venue. We're in the blue zone, which is an exciting area because here's where the governments are doing the consultations, the negotiations, and there's a lot of side events and diverse pavilions. The question is, so now, and you kind of mentioned it, Pam, in the beginning, there's a lot of emphasis and sharing happening in side events. So now I'd like to know from you, what is your idea? And you're all on mission. I can sense that. You're really clear on why you're here, what you want. And I hear the same from our ambassadors in the virtual space. So what would you like to see, and where in the negotiation streams would you like to see a stronger reference to mountain communities in the UNFC process, which you would consider as a game change to your cause, which is giving more attention to the vulnerability of mountain regions, the ecosystems, and the livelihoods, as we heard it, recognizing the key important role it plays not only for the local region, and I heard it from all the 4 speakers, it is actually appreciating the global goods, not the services, the environmental services, be it the glaciers, be it the soil capturing, be it so many things, so many global services that are underappreciated currently to the global planetary considerations, if I may say it this way. So this is my question to you, and I just will take the same round just for the ease of flow to see very shortly, where would you like to see it, like for the next COP? No? What can be done in this year's time to prepare for the next COP, which hopefully has a strong emphasis on all these matters, including on food systems, no? Forest, water, etc., you name it. Over to you, Pam.
Thank you, Julia, for raising very appropriate issue. I mentioned that let us recognize the mountain and Himalaya is an important agenda for the negotiation, for the process of negotiation and discussion. That was my first voice. And that is my first voice. Maybe this is important for all the people belonging to the mountain and Himalayas. Because why? Because mountain is different than other region. There are 2 or 3 important reasons behind. Number one, mountain is the pulse of the planet, pulse of the living planet, because it provides the, it is the tower, water tower, provides the water for nearly half of the total population of the planet, number one. Number two, it conserves the snow. It conserves the snow. If glacier melting and snow melting will continue, that hamper to the downstream countries, island countries. So they must realize that if snow melting, glacier melting will accelerate, increase, that hamper to the island country, because that increase the level of the sea. So downstream countries should also help the mountain people and mountain agenda, so that we can include this agenda in the process of negotiation. So that is our first agenda, and Nepal is strongly raising this issue in the process of negotiation. We are trying to do that. We are trying to include the cryosphere issue, snow-related issue, glacier-related issues in the main agenda. So that is the first I would like to recommend, and maybe this voice will be rightly listened in the process of negotiation. And second and most important issue that I would like to highlight, that mountains are not the problem. Mountains are the opportunity, you know. You see, the biodiversity is there. There is very high biodiversity in the mountain. Many biodiversity hotspots are there. Those kind of species you cannot see in other parts of the world, and that is not possible even because of the altitudinal variation and also microclimate. So biodiversity conservation is important in the mountain. So that is one of the opportunities that we have to take into account. And another important issue that, you know, ethnicity, culture, traditional knowledge is there. You know, people use the herbs for their to care of their health, and they are using the local resources for their livelihood. So these are some of the important peculiarity of the mountain. Therefore, mountain issues should be realized and include in the agenda of the negotiation at the global scale, and even in the regional and national scale also. It is important to highlight or take this issue into priority. So that is my important message that I would like to highlight today here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. Very clear. I heard you. Everybody heard you. Thanks for making a difference. Please, I hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I agree with Dr. Condell. Mountain issues should be considered in UNFP policy process. As I already mentioned, it is not only the issue of the mountain country, it is the global issue. So let's put the mountain agenda in the negotiation process, first one. And the second one is climate change is no more future agenda. My generation is experiencing the changes in mountain, and mountain people also facing the challenges because of the climate change. So let's speed up our initiatives and intervention. So we don't have much more time to deal with. My second point is that. And my third one is mountain people are not responsible for these changes. In fact, they are the victim, so they need the justice. So let's raise our voice for the climate justice for mountain people. And my third point is all the efforts to deal with the, to reduce the impact of climate change have limitations. If we are, whether we are talking about the adaptation or others, it has all have the limitations. So no more excuse, please, to implement the Paris Agreement and to achieve our temperature rise target, to limit our temperature rise. So please, I again want to share please, no more excuses. And the last one is, mountain people have their specified knowledge, their cultural and their indigenous knowledge they have, but all the challenges they are facing now is the additional one and the new one. So they have additional resources, additional knowledge to deal this new problem. So let's agree for the finance and capacity building for adaptation and loss and damage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Time is running out. Glaciers are melting, and there needs to be an approach of climate justice. What is your message, Luigi? Short and clear. We don't hear you. Could you unmute, please, your microphone? Can't hear you. Okay, maybe we shift quickly to Luis in the meantime. Can we shift to Luis?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, right, we hear you now.
Luigi, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Luis. Well, in the case of Peru, we hope that the alpaca fever chain will be given a great value, because as we comment, about 80,000 families living in poverty and depending of this system production. Some small producers depends on the change of the fever alpaca chain, and we hope that that it is important to give major value this chain, and maybe in the future the alpaca fever be included in the Mountain Products Initiative from FAO. Also, we consider that we need to create strategies to improve the productivity and the resilience of the Andean population.
Thank you so much.
Improvement of the value chain. Okay.
No, just conclude. You said we need to be really short. We need to be closing the session. So I just wanted to have like your take-home message, please. Please feel free to conclude.
Okay, yeah, just for finish, one of the strategies will be the improvement of the value chain of the Andean products. That's it.
Thank you, excellent. Thank you so much, and apologies to have to cut you. Luis, over to you. What is your take-home message to the COP26 delegates, please?
Yeah, I think very briefly, mountains are obviously a point of encounter, a bridge that links together. For example, in South America, all of the 7 countries, and it's very evident that there is a link between rural production systems, ecosystems, energy production, and livelihoods of the communities that live in the Andes. What is not so evident is that very often we're preaching to the already convinced. We need a more intersectoral approach. We need to take climate change outside of the environment ministries and take them to the energy ministries, to the economic ministries, to the health ministries, and to really create effective intersectoral policies that use mountains as spaces for experimentation and for real collaboration between the different sectors that make up our countries. So that's what I would hope to see for the future. To be more effective in reaching these other sectors of the economy that are normally not so active in these discussions.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Very, very important points you all raised. Unfortunately, time is not only running out for climate change, also for us for this session. And I feel really that I almost have done like a trip between the Himalayas and the Andean region, and I've learned so much. That's the privilege of being a moderator. You actually have to listen, and I really learned a lot about the mountain regions, and I really appreciate that. Herewith, I'd like to say some closing words for the Climate Change, Mountain and Future of Humanity session today. And let me express that on behalf of the Mountain Partnership. It is important to also see the climate change, and we heard it, it's not just the climate change agenda, it's actually the interconnection also with the SDG 30 agenda for sustainable development. And there is actually an explicit recognition of the role of sustainable mountain development under the SDG 6, which is the water, and under the SDG 15, life on land targets with a lot of like sub-indicators. And this is kind of a call for maybe for the political agenda to link it more strongly to SDG 13, which is the climate change agenda, or the climate change target under the Agenda 2030. And it's really important, and we heard it loud and clear, and I really loved our voyage we did from the political level, the matters how this can be addressed within the UNFC context here at COP, in the future COP and intersessionals, but then also to hear very practical examples looking through the little video you shared with us. Thank you again for that. What is the real impact of the vulnerable communities in the mountain regions? But not alone, also sharing a very positive message in terms of there are plenty of opportunities to strengthen, and it needs more attention in terms of policy measure, practical measures, climate finance, or finance in general, development finance. I think this is all very nicely coming together. And I also like to express like kind of an invitation to all work together under the Mountain Partnership, which you are already, but I guess there's plenty of other organizations, other governments out there who can join more forcefully the Mountain Partnership to together meet the challenges of the climate crisis in the mountain regions, and to ensure that no one is left behind. And that the most vulnerable communities who are not responsible for the climate crisis, and I heard that so many times here in the session. So thanks so much to everything. Thanks to the online community, and in particular thanks to the organizers, which is actually the Mountain Partnership of the FAO, together with other partners to make this session happen. Thanks to everybody, and have a lovely day.